Good afternoon, Chief Rabbi. I wonder if you could tell us what you think the causes of the current financial crisis are.
I think we have really forgotten that there are limits. We've acted as if our acts didn't have an impact on the world as a whole. And the end result is that we have lost a sense of the constraints of an economy, of the limits to exploiting the environment, of the extraordinary way in which in a global age everything is interconnected, so that the destruction of a rainforest here causes global warming there, the failure of a bank here impacts on an economy 10,000 miles away, a political disturbance in one part of the world can have repercussions in many others. We're terribly connected, and yet we've tended to think as if all that matters is me and the people close to me. And the end result, I think, is a coming together of a set of crises, economic, political, and environmental, all of which mean that your conference at this time is incredibly timely.
You mentioned a number of crises there. What do you think the impact is going to be on the poorest of the poor?
The poor really have suffered in our world. It's extraordinary how much the benefits of globalization have gone to the people who have most to begin with, and how the differentials between rich and poor within any country and between countries has grown over time, so that we are living in a world that by no stretch of the imagination could be called equitable. And far, far too many people, at the very least 1 billion of the 6 billion on Earth, are living under conditions that simply are an assault on basic human dignity, who don't have food, who don't have clean water, who don't have access to proper medical treatment. Many of them don't have access to education. They certainly don't have access to employment and the dignity of earning a livelihood. All of these things mean that a few are gaining while many are suffering.
And what would you see as being the way forward?
I think that when crisis hits, we have a chance to reflect on the fact that we are all deep down the same. We do have basic needs in common. It's a curious thing that suffering can sensitize us to the suffering of others. Now, I have seen just a little of that within our own community, in the most tiny ways, but they're significant. They're straws in the wind. A whole lot of young children, when they come to their bar mitzvah or their bat mitzvah, saying, please, I don't want a lavish do, I don't want presents, please take all the money you would have spent on me and give it to this charity. Now, when I mentioned that to Terry Wogan and John Humphreys at the BBC, they told me they're saying exactly the same thing. So I do believe that of all the 6,000 languages spoken on earth today, the only universal language is the language of tears. And when we face difficulties in our own lives, we begin to turn outward and see others facing deeper difficulties. And I hope really that is what will emerge from your conference, because nothing has shown us how closely interconnected we are than this succession of global crises. It takes us back to John Donne's "No man is an island, every man's death diminishes me, say, ask not for whom the bell tolls." I think we're being given the biggest reminder in living memory that we are all part of one another, and therefore we are part of the covenant of global responsibility.
I've heard you speak often of responsibilities and values. How do you think responsibilities could help us out of this crisis?
Well, when bad things happen to you, you can ask two different kinds of questions. Question one, why has this happened to me? Question two, what then shall I do? When you ask the first question, you begin to see yourself as a victim. And that's quite dangerous, because that means that you see yourself as powerless. You develop what the American psychotherapist Martin Seligman calls learned helplessness. And the only way out of that is the second response, which is, what then shall I do? And that is when we develop the ethic of responsibility. And then we discover that when we all work together, join hand to hand, we can together, collectively, move beyond the crisis. And it seems to me the ethic of responsibility is the only sane alternative to an ethic of victimhood, which creates anger and resentment and hate and violence, which we're seeing in many parts of the world. And therefore, I think the only way is to shift the paradigm, reframe, and ask, what collectively can we do? And there is no crisis that human beings got us into that human beings together can't get us out of.
Have you got any particular recommendations for the Congress?
Well, Rahm Emanuel, Barack Obama's chief of staff, did very wisely say, never waste a crisis. And Jim Wallace, that wonderful Christian activist in the States, said the best thing to ask about the present crisis is not when will it end, but how will it change us. And I think this is the approach that we have to take at the present moment. I think we got ourselves into financial crisis by a lot of people spending money they didn't have on things they didn't need. And we have overindulged ourselves in the affluent economies at the cost of many others, and we have to stop that. The second thing is we have to realize that we are the guardians of planet Earth for the sake of generations yet to come. And we have to stop consuming our resources and despoiling our environment in ways that will very rapidly become unbearable, as there is something of a tipping point in climate change, which if we don't stop soon, we're in danger of crossing. And the same, of course, applies to political conflict. It seems to me that you can either act on the basis of the grievances of the past or act out of a sense of responsibility to the future. Let's let go of the pains of the past and work together for the sake of our children and our grandchildren not yet born. Those, I think, are the key messages. I do think that whether you believe in God or destiny or invisible hand or anything, someone or something is sending us a message. Change before it's too late, because the whole future of humanity is currently at stake.
Thank you very much indeed, Chief Rabbi.
Thank you.